One solo reporter, 14 research pipelines running at once. Triple the income without lowering a single journalistic standard. 12 months ago, none of that existed. What existed was this: the blue light from 3 monitors reflecting off a cold cup of coffee, casting a pale glow across a desk buried under public records responses, printed court transcripts, and hand-scribbled timelines. It was nearly 2 in the morning, the silence broken only by the frantic clicking of a mouse as tab after tab was opened, scanned, and cross-referenced. On the center screen, a half-finished investigative draft sat stalled at paragraph 6. The story of a local municipal budget discrepancy was there, but the evidence remained a fractured puzzle of 12,000 line items in a disorganized spreadsheet, and 3 public records that did not quite speak the same language. This is the invisible wall of the independent journalist, the moment where the ambition of the story meets the physical limit of the human researcher. For every hour spent crafting a compelling sentence, 4 or 5 hours must be spent in the unglamorous trenches of verification and document review. Jessica Saylor sat in the center of this friction, realizing her output was not capped by her talent, but by the mechanical speed of her own eyes moving across a page. She was publishing 3 or 4 high-quality stories a month, a respectable pace that was nevertheless failing to provide a sustainable income. To survive, she needed to produce more. To maintain her integrity, she could not research less. What follows is how she broke that mathematical ceiling. Part 1. The shadow work of journalism. To understand the scale of that transformation, you first have to look at the structural exhaustion of the modern freelance reporter. Before the new system, Jessica's career was a series of intense, high-stress sprints followed by long periods of financial uncertainty. A typical Monday did not begin with a pen to paper. It began with the grueling labor of ingestion, downloading files from municipal websites, retyping data from scanned images into searchable formats, and trying to build a coherent map of relationships between local officials and private contractors. This was the shadow work of journalism, the unbillable, invisible hours required to earn the right to write a single lead. Jessica was meticulous, refusing to rely on single-source claims or unverified data, but that commitment to accuracy was also her primary financial constraint. By the time a story was verified, the news cycle had often moved on, or the time invested far exceeded the freelance fee she would eventually receive. The emotional toll was a state of permanent cognitive overload. She lived in a world of half-finished investigations and shelved ideas she simply did not have the hours to prove out. She felt less like a storyteller and more like a human filing cabinet, trapped in a cycle where her revenue was tied directly to her stamina and her capacity to absorb an almost unlimited volume of raw, unstructured information. Part 2. The breaking point. The problem transitioned from a personal frustration to a professional crisis during a month where 2 of her major features were killed by editors because the verification window had closed. Jessica looked at the folders of research representing 2 weeks of unpaid labor and realized she was heading toward total burnout. The threat was not just financial. It was the erosion of her journalistic curiosity. When every new lead represents a potential 40-hour undertaking, the natural instinct is to stop following leads. She could not take on breaking news or urgent assignments without abandoning her long-form investigative work. She was caught in a zero-sum competition for her own time. She reached a point where she understood that if she did not find a way to automate the mechanical layer of her work, the document sorting, the pattern recognition, the initial source verification, she would be forced to leave independent journalism entirely and take a corporate communications role just to cover her basic expenses. She had watched other reporters make that exact trade. Talented investigators who now wrote press releases for the same institutions they once covered, not because they lost their edge, but because the economics of independent verification simply stopped working. The math was brutal in its clarity. Every hour of research was an hour she wasn't paid for. Every standard she upheld raised the cost of every story, and the market did not pay a premium for meticulousness. it paid for volume. Part 3. Building the research engine. The discovery of a new model began when Jessica stopped looking for better note-taking applications and started looking for a unified intelligence architecture. She spent a month of her own time building what she called her research engine, a retrieval-augmented AI pipeline, combining document analysis models with optical character recognition, designed to handle the heavy lifting of the pre-writing phase. Her first breakthrough was in AI-assisted document analysis and public records processing. She implemented a protocol utilizing custom models to process thousands of pages of municipal records and court transcripts in mere minutes. Unlike a simple keyword search, the system understood the context of the language, flagging specific discrepancies between two different documents that had been filed months apart. She then moved to automated source identification and background research, a workflow that scanned professional databases and public archives to create influence maps of the subjects she was covering. The trial and error process was rigorous. Her first iterations were too prone to generating unverified connections and missing subtle nuances in legal terminology. One early test confidently linked two officials who turned out to share nothing but a common surname, a mistake that, had it reached print, would have ended her career in a single news cycle. That failure became the system's most important design constraint. So she built a closed-loop architecture, where every AI-generated claim had to be accompanied by a direct citation to a source document she had uploaded herself. She was not asking the machine to tell her the story. She was asking it to find the evidence, so she could decide what the story was. That distinction was the foundation of the entire system. Part 4. The connection no human would find. The transformation reached its peak when she integrated AI-driven pattern recognition across large datasets. She began feeding the system entire years of city council meeting minutes and local permit filings, looking for anomalies that a human eye would almost certainly miss in a reasonable amount of time. The moment of clarity came during a deep dive into a local land use controversy. A reasoning application had sailed through committee with unusual speed, and Jessica suspected, but could not prove, that someone on the inside stood to benefit. Her research engine flagged a subtle connection between that reasoning application and a minor bankruptcy filing from 5 years prior. The names on the documents were different, the addresses were different, but buried in the fine print of an appendix, the system identified a shared registered agent and a matching corporate address, linking a shell company in the bankruptcy case to the entity behind the reasoning request. It was a connection that would have taken weeks to find manually, if she had even known to look for it. She spent the next 2 days doing what only a human journalist can do, calling sources, confirming the paper trail, and pressure testing every link in the chain. The surface connection became the central revelation of an investigative piece exposing a significant conflict of interest in the city's development planning process. The story did not just get published. It was picked up by a major national outlet, contributed to a public inquiry, and established Jessica as a prominent investigative voice in her region. The turning point wasn't the prose. It was the fact that the evidence gap had been closed in 48 hours instead of 48 days. Part 5. Triple the output, same standards. The results were a radical shift in the scale and sustainability of her career. By collapsing the research phase, she moved from publishing 3 or 4 stories a month to a consistent double-digit output, her team of 1, running multiple research pipelines in parallel, each working in the background while she wrote. Her income more than tripled as she maintained her long-form investigative projects while simultaneously taking on data-driven reporting for multiple outlets. Her prose quality remained as strong as ever, because she now had more mental energy to devote to the actual craft of writing, rather than the mechanics of collection. A typical Tuesday now begins not with a data dump, but with a review of the research summaries generated overnight. Each summary arrives with its citations attached, every claim traceable to a specific page in a specific document that she can pull up and verify in seconds. Mornings for high-level source interviews. afternoons for narrative construction. The verification standard never changed. What changed was how much of her day it consumed. Where document review once swallowed 80% of her working hours, it now takes a fraction of that. And the hours she reclaimed did not go to leisure. They went to the phone calls, the follow-up questions, and the human judgment that no system can replicate. She has successfully decoupled her value from the grind of research and attached it to the impact of her stories. She is no longer a reporter limited by the speed of her reading. She is a journalist limited only by the depth of her curiosity. The hard truth for 2026 is that the reporters who will define the next decade are not the ones who write the fastest, but the ones who can synthesize the most information with the highest accuracy in the least time. Jessica did not win by taking shortcuts. She won by using technology to uphold her standards at a scale that was previously impossible for a solo reporter. And somewhere tonight, another reporter is sitting in the blue glow of a monitor, staring at thousands of pages of public records, wondering whether the story is worth the effort. Jessica's experience suggests the real question isn't whether AI will replace investigative journalism. It's whether the reporters who learn to investigate with it will eventually set a pace the rest simply cannot match. So here is the question we want you to answer in the comments. If you had an AI researcher working beside you tomorrow morning, what task would you hand it first? To see the specific document analysis frameworks and verification protocols behind systems like Jessica's, watch our next video on the automated reporting stack.